All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our multi-cloud happenings for February. Can you believe that February is almost over, Suzanne? I'm in shock, actually. This month just flew by.
It's a short month. It is always.
It is. So today in multi-cloud happening, Suzanne and I want to talk to you about cloud automation for our Exadata Database Service deployments in the Oracle Database at Azure solution. I've been getting lots of questions. It's been great if some of the customers of you that joined us, I've talked to you. It's great to be able to talk to you. But I think this is a really important topic to understand how to manage your service within this solution. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Today, hi, my name is Tammy Bednar, and I'm a product manager that focuses on our Exadata database services on Cloud Customer in the public cloud and in multi-cloud, and of course, our base database services as well. And joining me is Suzanne Holliday. Hey, Suzanne.
Hi, Tammy. I'm supporting exactly the same database services as Tammy with multi-cloud specialization.
Awesome. All right. So this is so we just have to say this is a safe harbor statement. So anything Suzanne and I say, you can't write into a contract because we're product managers, and sometimes, product managers say things that talk about futures, and you can't put that in the contract. That's basically what this says. Okay, so now let's kick this off. I'm going to have Suzanne talk to us about the Oracle Database at Azure solution, so we're all on the same page before we start talking about cloud automation. So Suzanne, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tammy. So last time, back in January, Tammy and I did an introduction to Oracle Database at Azure. We're not going to do another brief introduction. We're just going to really show you the highlights of the service, which encapsulates the benefits of the commercials, as well as the really interesting technology that we're bringing to you in Azure Data Center with Exadata Database Service. So on this slide, what we're showing here is that we've come together with Microsoft. We understand our customers are at a juncture where they've got their applications running on premises, long-time valued Oracle customers running applications as well on with Microsoft Azure as well. Maybe they've already gone to Azure already as a strategic cloud provider, but the long and short of it is they'll probably have some Microsoft applications as well on premises with Oracle databases. And we've got together with Microsoft in this strategic partnership last year where we really wanted to bring the Exadata database hardware into the Azure Data Center, which is very, very unique. It's a pioneer kind of first of industry first strategic partnership of its kind. And we've got together with Microsoft to sit down and look at how we can make things simpler for you as a customer. And some of these things you can see on this slide, highlight these advantages. So we're talking about how you as an Azure customer, or Microsoft customer, I should say, is probably already familiar with the Azure Marketplace. So it was decided that this service would be driven through Microsoft in the Azure Marketplace, and this would be executed as what Microsoft call a private offer. And the complete advantage here is that it's executed from start to finish in this private offer. And on the back end, what we're doing in Oracle and our sales reps, we still maintain the relationship with you and provide you pricing, but it's all done through this portal back and forth between us and Microsoft, but delivered to you transparently as one unified bill as a private offer. And in extension to all of these benefits, we've also arranged for Microsoft commitments called MAC to burn down the Exadata database service and for you to continue the licensing advantages such as bring your own license or license included when provisioning our Exadata database service. Now, what this means for you is that you can leverage your existing Azure skill set and your Oracle database skills, but you can also receive complete optimized performance because now the Exadata database service is running right in the data center, optimally in the same availability zone as your applications. But at the end of the day, it's up to you where you choose to run your workloads. And as we see on this slide, you've got a whole plethora of choice now for deploying and managing and monitoring your applications through APIs and portals. Now, the subject of today's session is exactly that. We're going to be talking to you about, you may not have already seen Oracle Cloud Infrastructure? And if you haven't, then you may have a preference to actually call the command line interfaces and the APIs directly from Azure itself, and how we can actually deploy and manage the Exadata database lifecycle. Next slide, please, Tammy. So just to give a brief recap, like I mentioned, you've probably got Azure applications running already. And, there's a whole common wide range of use cases that we're seeing, which range, of course, from business intelligence, data analytics with Power BI, Azure Synapse, OpenAI, as well as IoT use cases. However, the preference is to stay with Oracle, and you can continue, developing new applications on such as new workloads for modern application development, maybe microservices or usage of Kubernetes and so forth with the Azure Kubernetes service. But you'll want to maintain your Oracle database, and this is how we've making this available to you, and how we can talk about today. This is now possible within the Azure Data Center itself. Next slide, please, Tammy. So the Exadata Database Service is exactly the same as what the Oracle Cloud offers you with the Oracle Database at Azure. And as you've probably heard, Exadata, it's ubiquitous in the sense that it's available in a lot of places. For example, Oracle Cloud. Now we've got Oracle Database at Azure in the Azure data centers, and Cloud at Customer in your private data center, as well as on premises. So with the fact that it's the exact same service that's running in the Oracle Cloud, what we've done with Oracle Database at Azure is that we've added deployment optimizations. The Exadata hardware is deployed in the Azure Data Center, and you can provision in the same AZ, as I said previously, with your Azure applications. Now, because the Exadata Database Service has the same architecture on premises as it does as the cloud service, you can perform a straightforward lift and shift. And what this means is, as I spoke about before, is that you may have an estate of, let's say, applications that have been running a long time on premises, and you want to replace possibly outdated infrastructure with modern cloud solutions that run Oracle database workloads with high performance, scale, and availability with your Azure applications. So this is really the best platform for the Oracle database. Exadata Database Service, it provides you superior performance, scalability, availability, and security at a lower cost. And the reason why we say that is because we've got various deployment and use cases options available with respect to consolidation. So like I said, when you're talking about bringing your workloads on premises, you can actually reduce cost by consolidating and bringing those workloads in together. Now, we're using the best hardware available on the market. And what makes Exadata so special is this Smart Database OS system software. And this is because it's implementing these specialized algorithms. And what they do is they improve processing of all types of workloads, whether that's OLTP, analytics, and batch, of course. And as I mentioned, consolidation. So these smart management tools make Exadata really easy to use and manage. And an important point to point out to you, which a lot of customers are asking us about Oracle Database at Azure, is that the actual Exadata cloud infrastructure is dedicated to you. And we will show how we're provisioning that, as well as the VM clusters and the databases later on. And we've got great cloud economics with the service, because you're actually purchasing what you're using. You've got a 48-hour minimum, and you're actually paying on the OCPs that you're actually using. I think we've got a minimum of 1 minute, but then it's per second billing. So it's very, very, very much pay per use in that sense. So let's go ahead and have a look now at the main subject of this session, which is cloud automation for lifecycle management in Oracle Database at Azure. Now, the reason why we're showing this here, before Tammy delves into how we actually run all this from Azure, we just want to talk about the fact that this is inherent in our Exadata Database Service. And it's the Oracle Cloud infrastructure that's providing you this wide management choice of interfaces that Exadata Database Service uses. And this cloud automation What it does, it really simplifies your lifecycle and your management tasks, including additional servers, whether that's scaling OCPUs up and down, creating database homes, as well as scheduling infrastructure maintenance and updating and upgrading VM operating systems, grid infrastructure, database, as well as your backup and recovery operations too. Now, Tammy's going to take us through, excuse me, some of these operations in more detail, and that's the focus of what we're going to be talking about today. Next slide, please, Tammy. First of all, I just want to give you a little refresher on the architecture. So as you can see here, as I've already said, we're deploying Exadata Database Service with the Exadata Database infrastructure right into the Azure region itself, into the data center. And we've got this depicted on the left side with the blue box for the actual availability zone itself. And we can see here that we've got VNets, and we've got something called an OCI child site. So I'm going to tell you exactly what that is in a minute. So we've got Exadata Database Service. The actual data plane itself is deployed in Azure. And how we're doing this is that we've got delegated client subnet, and that's required in the VNet in order to deploy an Exadata VM cluster. And then on the VCN, on the OCI side, you can see on the very far right where we're actually in the OCI region itself. This is created at the time of the VM cluster, and then we've got this ability to have the VM cluster creation, which contains both the client and subnet side ranges. So what we're doing here is we're ensuring that we've got the ability to run Exadata and then create these VM clusters in Azure itself. And we actually, you see on the far right, we've got things like network traffic going over into OCI via the control plane. And the reason why we're doing this is because the encryption and backup are going through the OCI manager network. So this is the way in which we're deploying it. So the data plane is in Azure. The control plane is still required by OCI. And then we've got this OCI child site, which is where Exadata Database Service is running. And like I said before, at the VM cluster creation, we've got the client and the subnet side arrangers to make the connectivity happen. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, please, Tammy, I'm going to just briefly take you through the UI aspects of the Exadata Database Service, because when we're talking about the ways and means that you can actually deploy Exadata Database Service, maintain, and also schedule maintenance, it's really, you've got a wide choice of interfaces that you can use. And this is what Tammy's going to be going through today. I'll just start off by just making you familiar once again with the UI aspects. And this is what that we actually covered in the last session last time. But we can see here that we've, as Tammy's showing us, this is the UI itself. And this is how you can actually deploy. And once you've got your VM clusters set up, you can see here you've got the means to actually go in and connect to OCI via that link that she's clicking on there, and that will take you straight through. Okay, now at that point we are ready to do whatever we want in the sense of database creation and management. But let's just go through how you would actually just briefly provision the Exadata infrastructure. So on the Azure portal that Tammy was just on, you can see that we had the ability to, first of all, go in and create the infrastructure, because we'd always do that with an Exadata Database Service. That's your first step. And you just enter your basic information, your name, your AZ, your subscription, of course, your resource group that you want to deploy in on the Azure side. You choose the Exadata infrastructure with the number of database servers and storage servers that you want to deploy. And then you select, if you wish, you can select the managed patching for the infrastructure to schedule these maintenance runs at the time of the infrastructure provisioning. And then once you've done that, you hit, agree, and then it goes forward and provisions the Exadata infrastructure. Next slide, please, Tammy. So after that's done, your next step would be to provision the Exadata VM cluster. Again, this happens in the Azure portal. And you enter your basic information, your name, your AZ, your subscription and resource group that you want to deploy in, and you select the type of licensing at this point, whether that's bring your own license or licensing included. And then here, this is at this point, you would allocate your VM cluster resources, your memory, your nodes, and your storage, etc. And this is where we would select that VNet, select the VNet that will be deployed in the 2 delegated subnets that I spoke about previously. So next slide, please, Tammy. So now I'm going to, sorry, the final piece on the UI aspects is once you've actually provisioned the Exadata and the infrastructure and the VM clusters, you then would obviously have to then create and manage your databases. And that would, from a UI perspective, that would be done through the OCI console. And this is where Tammy just showed you previously from the Azure portal. You can actually punch out quite effectively and quickly from that into the OCI console to do this piece. But now I'm going to hand over now to Tammy, who's going to explain the other interfaces that we can use, because it's quite quite usual that customers may not be familiar with OCI UI and have a preference for doing things from the command line. So over to you, Tammy.
Thanks, Suzanne. That was a great overview. And the other thing I want to stress is we have a lot of these different interfaces and automation to use for our cloud services. And I think that hopefully you can see by the end of this how we are this is a great integrated multi-cloud solution to use with your applications and your database plane that you want to use where you want it. So we just talked about the UI. We like to talk about the UI a lot because it's a really great way to demonstrate our services. It's a really great way to show how we do tasks and things like that. So now let's take a look at some of the other automation interfaces or tools that we have that are available and how you can use them. So the next area I want to talk about is the CLI or the OCI CLI. So the OCI CLI, anything that you can do in a console, we have an OCI CLI command to do that. So some of you like to use the UI, others no way, they want to use the command line. So this CLI is the way to perform automation or use cloud automation with the command line interface. I have some links on where you follow the product documentation. You install the OCI CLI on your client. It is supported on Linux operating systems, Mac operating systems, and Windows OS as well. There is an Oracle Linux Cloud Developer image, and it's pre-installed in the Oracle Linux Cloud Developer Platform images if you want from OCI. And the way you can run this is from the OCI Cloud Shell. And what we're really going to focus on is how you run it from the Azure PowerShell as well. So it supports all those different operations with the Exadata Database Service. So you can manage the deployments of the database lifecycle. You can manage updates and maintenance operations. You can scale your VM cluster resources. You can add keys and a lot more other things. So here is a bit.ly link that I created over to our OCI CLI documentation. And so really what we're going to focus on in the OCI CLI is how you manage your database lifecycle. There's also a scan code here if you want to scan the code, but it will take you over to the OCI CLI command reference documentation here. And when you go over there, it's found under the section called DB. So when you go to DB, there's lots of different commands. There's some autonomous ones. There are some that are specific for the Cloud at Customer Exadata Database Service. So take a look at the description. So before you use the CLI command, make sure that it is for the Exadata Database Service that you're executing it for. Okay. So let's take a look at how you can use the CLI on Azure Cloud Shell. So as Suzanne showed you earlier, for the infrastructure and the VM clusters, those will be provisioned via the Azure native interface. And anything to do with the networking at this point in time, you want to make sure you use the Azure interface. So now you have your infrastructure provisioned, you have your VM cluster provisioned, you are now ready to provision some databases within that VM cluster. The very first thing you're going to have to do, is you're going to click on the Cloud shell, and then you're going to switch over to the Bash shell, and then you're going to run this command to download or install, I should say, the OCI CLI commands. After that is done, you respond to all the installation script prompts. And then once that's done, it's going to ask you about setting up the OCI setup config. And this is going to give you the information to create a configuration file. And you also will get the API public and private keys. And you'll need this as part of your fingerprint. So you can see here that we generated the API, we've copied over the API key, and now we've created your fingerprint that you can use, and you can verify the configuration file. Once that's done, every time you start up the Cloud shell, then you're ready to run the OCI CLI commands. All right, so let's take a look. Whoops. Does it want to go down? Okay, the very first one is, so here's some examples with the OCI CLI, the Azure Cloud Shell. You can manage your keys, as I mentioned, change licensing model, anything you can do from the console, you can now run with the OCI CLI command within the Azure PowerShell. So let's take a look at
when you say the console, you mean
the UI console. Yes.
The UI console.
The UI console. That's right. So let's take a look at this very simple one. Let's list all our Exadata VM clusters. So the way the syntax is, it's OCI is the first word, and then you put in what is the service, what is the type of service you're executing on, what is the action, and then if there's any other options. So in this particular case, you would run OCI, the service is DB, Cloud VM cluster is the resource type, and then list is the action that we're going to do. And then you can substitute $C for your compartment OCID. So in OCI, we use OCIDs. So if you're used to Azure and now you're going over to OCI to use the OCI commands, you're going to need what the OCIDs are. We have OCIDs for everything, and then any other option. So here you can see we ran OCI DB Cloud VM cluster list -- compartment ID. We're going to see the compartment ID. We list the compartment ID, and then we have a query. And this particular query allows us to make the result set into this nice little table that you see here. So you can see that in my VM cluster list that I have provisioned on Azure, I have a VM cluster named DBPM Exa VMC-202402. It's running GI version 19.21. And then here's my VM cluster OCID. So if you need that information, then that's an easy way to obtain the information through this command. Here's another command that you'll find really useful whenever you need to apply maintenance updates to your VM cluster. This is a way for you to list all the different updates that are available. And you can see that on this particular one that we have an OS update of 23 and 22 available. We also have a 19C database system patch as well for the GI. So you can see the update type, you can see the, and you can also see the description of what you want to list. So again, very helpful commands to find out what you want to apply to begin with. Now, here's a command that you will probably find very useful, especially when you're running different workloads and you need to scale up the number of OCPUs. So here you can see you run OCI DB Cloud VM cluster update -- the cluster ID, and then what you want the new CPU core count to be. So now we're increasing it to 16 OCPUs. And when you're ready to scale down, you just run this command again with a lower number of CPUs. Very easy to do. Okay. How about when you want to either create a new database home with a specific database version, or you want to update a database home with a new version? So in OCI, or in the database area, we have something called Create Custom Database Software Image. And this custom database software image functionality allows you to create a specific version of a database home and also build this image with either one-off patches or a current inventory of another Oracle home you may use, because you may have a number of different patches. So you can see this is kind of a long, excuse me, command in order to create this software image, but it's very easy to create a template and then just copy it in with the updates that you want to make. So you can see that we're going to create a database version of 19.0 with patch set version 19.19. We don't have any one-off patches that we want to apply, and we're going to create this software image a software image that we're going to use later in order to create a new Oracle home. So now we're going to create that new Oracle home from that custom database software image that we just created. And you can create as many software images that you want based on all the Oracle home versions that you have or the one-off patches that you want to keep. This is just a way for you to create key images for you to create your database homes or update your database homes with. So here's the command that we're going to use to create a DB home. We're creating it with a database software image. As you can see, again, we're using the OSID of the database software image that we just created. You create and you specify what do you want the name of that new Oracle home to be, again, and then you put in all the different information that's highlighted in yellow in order to create your database home. Again, it's really easy to start creating these templates and then plugging in the different values that are specific for that database home or for that software image. Okay, here's another one where you just want to create an Oracle database without using a custom software image. Again, this will provide you the information of the OCI CLI command on how to create the database and which VM cluster you want that database home to be created in. Very, very simple. And again, using the same syntax. Once you have a CDB, now, by the way, the databases that we're creating, these are CDB databases. Once you create a CDB database, then you can easily create additional pluggable databases as well using the same kind of syntax. And if you want to see all the different updates to database homes, just like we did with the VM clusters, you can see that we ran this OCI DB patch list DB home command, and we have the description, the patch ID, which you will need in order to apply it to that database home, and then what that version is of that patch ID as well. And here is an example, a sample JSON file that you create to apply updates to database home. So you can say create a JSON file called my DB home update, and within that JSON file you have, I'm going to do a pre-check, and then the patch ID. Remember that patch ID we just got? This will be a patch ID that you're going to apply to the database home. And here is where we apply the updates after we run a pre-check. Now we're going to apply those updates to the database home as well. So again, you can see that anything you can do within the UI console, you can also use the CLI to also perform the same kinds of tasks and automate a lot of these tasks as well. This is a way for once you create a CDB or a CDB database, how you can enable automatic backups. So again, this allows you to specify the different parameters based on where you want the automatic backup to go to. And this, again, we're doing this all from the Azure PowerShell as well. This is how you can create a database from backup. This gives you the option that you have a backup that you've already made in your database. Now you want to create a database from backup. If you have those kinds of needs, we have the OCI CLI command to provide that functionality. Okay, so that was the OCI CLI. So hopefully you got a good sense that anything you can do from a UI, you can also perform the same kinds of tasks and use that automation from the command line as well. The next area is REST. So OCI REST is used to have programmatic access via HTTPS to the functions that interact with all the different resources that we have. Now, under the covers, the UI REST API calls are executing functions that are exposed in the UI, just like the CLI, right? You saw how we had the UI, now we have the CLI, now we have REST. You can use the REST API with the Exadata Database Service to provision and manage database deployments for the service. And each REST API call maps to one of the following HTTP requests. You get an object, you add an object, you update an object, you delete an object. I mean, that's really what you need to remember with the REST API. In order to access the Exadata Database Service by the REST API, you have to use the REST endpoint URL that's associated with your service instance, and those are listed in the documentation as well. A lot of the REST API operations do require that JSON in the request body or return a JSON in the response body. So here is another bit.ly link and a QR code that will direct you to the OCI API reference and endpoints. And you can find the Exadata Database Service commands under the Database Service API. As you can see here, it will take you there. And then you can see a list of the API endpoints that are available for your service to use to execute the REST API. And here you can see is a GIF of using Postman, which is a very popular open source tool that allows you to, it's showing you how to enable OCPU resources for the Exadata VM cluster. Like you want to scale them up. So now we've shown the UI on how to scale up. Now we've seen the CLI. Now you see the REST API. So you can see the flexibility and the open source capabilities that give you how to execute these tasks using whatever cloud automation tool that you're the most comfortable with. You can achieve the same capabilities. And this is a REST API example using OCI Cloud Shell. Again, just cutting and pasting the request and then being able to receive the information as well. Okay, finally, the last area that I want to talk about is Terraform. So when do you want to use Terraform for the Exadata Database Service? This allows you, again, to programmatically create, manage, version, look at the infrastructure as a code model is where I also hear about Terraform, infrastructure as a code. Some common use cases for using Terraform is it gives you the opportunity to duplicate or rebuild your existing infrastructure architecture, new tenancy or region. It's easy to detect a state drift of your Terraform managed resources. And the way you use it, you install the OCI Terraform provider, and there is documentation on how to do that for both OCI and Azure. You configure the Terraform provider using the tenancy details such as OSID, user OSID. I said OSIDs are really important to know, but get to know. The region, your private and public key, and fingerprint of your key pair. You can describe the Exadata Database Service infrastructure into a Terraform configuration file and keep that. You can initialize Terraform, run the Terraform plan, and then apply any Terraform configurations. Now, that is the way we do it in OCI as well. I'm sure in Azure you can do it the same. Here is the Terraform provider documentation. On the left-hand side is a bit.ly link to the OCI Terraform documentation. And when you go to the Terraform documentation, look under database. And again, there's a number of different database Terraform commands. Make sure that those apply to the Exadata Database Service. The top QR code is for the OCI Terraform service. The Azure Resource Group Terraform can be found at this bit.ly link. And if you go over and you look at Azure RM_resource group _template _deployment, that is where you will find the Terraform information or commands to provision the infrastructure as well as the VM clusters. if you go looking now, you won't see it. It is coming, so keep an eye out on it. We are working with Microsoft, of course, to get the Terraform in for the infrastructure and the VM clusters in as soon as possible. But keep an eye on that, but that's where you'll be able to find it when it is available. Okay. So the nice thing about Terraform is that you can execute the Azure Terraform as well as OCI Terraform together. You could create a Terraform script to provision infrastructure, VM cluster, and the data CDBs and the PDBs if you wanted to. And so that really makes it a really nice integrated package, or you can separate them out, which I think is what a lot of our customers do. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're doing a lot of build up, tear down, and then rebuilding, then maybe you've already figured out how to do this whole entire process with one Terraform script. So it's up to you. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. When it comes to the Oracle Database at Azure solution, for the infrastructure and the VM cluster, you want to make sure that you use the Azure UI or the Azure Terraform and eventually the Azure APIs to provision those two resources. Then you're going to use the OCI resources, or I should say Terraform and command line, in order to manage your database in your database homes. And here you can see the examples of the Terraform calls in order to manage the Oracle database stack. The general syntax for Terraform is resource, and then in double quotes, your provider, the type, and then the name, and then configuration. So let's take an example of this. So here is very important to show you how you can use Azure and OCI with your Terraform provider in the same script. So this is really great, shows the integration here. So this is an example of what the Exadata infrastructure will look like with Terraform in using the Azure Resource Group template deployment. Again, it's not there, it is coming, so please bear with us while we finish getting this implemented within the Terraform. But again, it just kind of shows you how you can easily deploy the infrastructure using Terraform as well. And then this is an example template of how you provision a VM cluster. And then we have, once you, as again, the steps is infrastructure, VM cluster, now you're ready for database homes. And this gives you an example of Terraform using for configuration for the database home creation. And you can see that the command is resource OCI _database _db _home. My DB home, and then all the information of what the parameters or the configuration parameters for that database home. And this is how you can create a CDB database creation. And then how you can create pluggable database creation as well. And then here's an example of how we're running the Terraform to create the OCI database from within the Azure Cloud Shell, or PowerShell. So you can see again, flexibility of where you want to run your Terraform script, how you want to run your Terraform script, what you want to put in your Terraform script. Lots of flexibility, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you're most familiar with as well. Whoops. All right, so Suzanne, that was kind of a really quick overview of all the UI information. Again, I think that we're really excited about seeing these options for cloud automation in order to manage your Exadata database service and its resources.
Exactly. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat as well about this topic. It's very, very popular with customers.
Awesome.
I think, yeah, it's great. We can discuss these live as well, some of the questions that are coming through. I think, it's a big talking point because we're actually splitting the provisioning between the Azure portal with respect to the Exadata infrastructure and the VM clusters on the Azure side, and then the database management. But as you explained in intricate detail, how you can use all the variants of the interfaces that we have and still call these from the Azure Cloud Shell. which I think is what customers really, really need in practice, because A, they may not want to learn the OCI console, and B, it's everyday life for them. They have to really automate repetitive processes. So all in all, we're saying that we can use our cloud automation from Azure, and these are the ways that you do it that you've demonstrated. And you can easily provision the Oracle Exadata Database Service in the AZ itself via the native Azure portal, and deploy anything in terms of database management, creation, and so forth. Not always in the OCI UI. You've got the option to do that in the Azure shell as well by calling the API CLI and Terraform. So ultimately, what we're doing here is we're just giving our customers the best option to get these applications that maybe have been marooned on premises and get them into the cloud in Azure, within such close proximity of the database, within the application, but then have that luxury of leveraging all the goodness of Exadata Database Service, as we mentioned all the time, with respect to high availability, scalability, first and foremost performance with Exadata. And for the first time, what's groundbreaking is that Azure applications can use real application clusters as well. So we're really providing this closest proximity to give our customers lowest latency. So should we go to the Q&A?
Yes, thank you again for joining us today. So let's really quickly go over our questions. So the first one from Ashish about requesting more clarity on the network part. We agree with you, and we will see what we can do maybe in March. Suzanne, maybe we can have more clarity on all the networking. So thank you for asking that question. So join us next month, and hopefully we'll have more clarity and better documentation on the network architecture. So thanks, Ashish, for joining us.
Yeah, I just thought we could talk about this just because I think you and I decided we're going to do that topic next.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, that's true. We're going to do that.
We are. So we're gonna cover that one next. We did touch on it in the overview in the last session, but such a high level, it really warrants a session in its own.
Yeah. I agree. Okay, Alan asked, when can we expect an ADB and Oracle Database at Azure solution? Great question, Alan. Stay tuned, because I have a warm, fuzzy feeling you'll hear more about that next month. Now, the first ADB service that will be offered is the ADB serverless solution. And when that is available, we will be more than happy to also talk about all the details about how that works in the Oracle Database at Azure solution as well. So stay tuned, Alan, coming shortly. Okay, Simo asks, is 12c version available on the Exadata Database Service? Good question, and I'm going to say yes. So we have the same process. Please have your account team create an exception request for your tenancy. Once you have your tenancy created in the Oracle Database at Azure solution, we just need to get that tenancy ID, and then we can whitelist that so you can have the 12c version available. I do hope that you have a good plan of upgrading your 12c databases to 19c, and yes, mainly for migration purposes. So just let your account team know what that plan is, so that we're also aware of that, so we can help you if you need any help to upgrade to 19c.
Simo's a partner, so this is advice that you need to be giving to your customers, Simo, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jeremy asked, will we get the slides? You know what? I think, Suzanne, we'll try to figure out how we can update the slides at the Ask Tom. If not,
with the new platform, they're available, I believe, now.
All right. So we'll get those updated, Jeremy.
Yeah.
If you don't hear from us, reach out to Suzanne or myself, and we'll be happy to send those to you as well. All right.
First name, last name at oracle.com.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us today. And Rashmi, do we have to enable account linking and subscription linking? I believe we should not be required. It is a private offer, and I believe you do have a subscription, right, Suzanne?
We do, and within the onboarding phase, we're actually performing an automation that will actually do this linking between your subscriptions and your accounts. And that's the process that we take customers through very closely and provide them a lot of support with right now. Okay.
All righty, great. Thank you, Diana. Again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I think we've answered all the questions, and I hope that you found this session helpful. We will put on the list to cover the networking, and if there are any other topics with multi-cloud that you would like to hear from me and Suzanne, we would love to bring those to you. So have a great month, and we'll see you at the end of March. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thanks, Tammy.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.